at 3:47 a.m. on February 14, 1945. The Ledo Road cuts through Burma like a scar across dead skin. Fog sits thick across the valley floor, transforming the landscape into something between solid ground and open sky. Visibility measures in yards, not miles. Headlights from the departed convoy still glow faintly in memory. Soft halos that dissolved into the mountain passes 2 hours earlier. Corporal James Harlan stands beside the M116 pack howitzer. The metal burns cold through his gloves. 23 years old, 23rd Ordnance Company, assigned to an observation post that was supposed to hold 6 men. He is alone. The rest of his crew rotated out yesterday for medical clearance after a dysentery outbreak tore through the supply depot. Replacements were promised by nightfall. They never arrived. His breath comes in white clouds that hang briefly before vanishing into the darkness. The howitzer sits positioned on a rocky outcrop 40 feet above the road, angled to cover the eastern approach where the valley narrows. Standard artillery doctrine requires a gun crew: loader, gunner, assistant gunner, ammunition handler, section chief, driver. The manual specifies coordinated movement, precise timing. Division of labor: 1 man cannot operate a 75mm cannon designed for 6. The orders were explicit: maintain radio silence, observe only, do not engage without authorization from command, report enemy movement if contact occurs, then withdraw to secondary positions 3 miles west. The radio sits silent on its mounting bracket, antenna pointed toward headquarters 27 miles southeast. Static hums beneath the frequency dial. No traffic, no updates, no voices. Below, through breaks in the fog, movement appears. 7 shapes materialize on the road surface where the convoy will return at dawn. The spacing is wrong. Allied trucks maintain 12-second intervals at night to prevent chain collisions in poor visibility. These vehicles cluster tight, bunched like predators waiting. The silhouettes register as unfamiliar. Japanese Type 97 medium trucks, likely an ambush element. They've positioned themselves on the widest section of road, where the convoy will accelerate after climbing the switchbacks from the river crossing. Harlan's hand rests on the howitzer's traverse wheel. The metal feels heavier than it should. Elevation already set for the road junction. Ammunition stored in wooden crates, stacked 6 feet behind the gun position. High explosive shells, each weighing 14 pounds. Loading procedure requires 2 men, minimum. 1 to break open the breech, 1 to insert the round. Closing the breech mechanism demands coordinated pressure. Aiming through indirect fire requires calculations he was trained to assist with, not perform alone. The fog thickens. Engine noise drifts up from the valley, low and patient. The Japanese trucks idle in position, waiting. 43 Allied trucks will return this route at dawn. The convoy carries ammunition, medical supplies, rations for the advance on Mandalay. 900 soldiers depend on that resupply reaching the front line before noon. The return trip follows standard procedure. Same route, same timing. Predictable as clockwork. Safe passage assumed because observation posts like this one are supposed to spot threats before they develop into contact. The manual says nothing about what to do when you're the only person standing between an ambush and 43 trucks full of soldiers who trust the road is clear. Harlan looks at the howitzer, then at the road, then at his hands. The traverse wheel turns under his palm. Cold steel against cold steel. The barrel shifts 1 degree east. James Harlan grew up in Akron, Ohio, where rubber met steel, and industrial rhythm measured time in shifts. His father maintained turbines at the Goodyear plant, massive rotating systems that powered conveyor belts and vulcanizing presses. The factory operated 24 hours, 365 days. Downtime meant lost production. Lost production meant layoffs. Harlan spent his evenings in the machine shop after school ended. No formal apprenticeship, just observation and repetition. He learned to read vibration patterns in rotating equipment by placing his hand against housing units, feeling irregularities through metal casings. His father taught him that precision and timing could prevent catastrophic failure. A bearing worn 0.02 of an inch out of tolerance would destroy itself within 48 hours. The turbine didn't announce problems. It whispered them through temperature shifts and harmonic changes only careful attention could detect. He enlisted in 1943. 18 years old, high school diploma, no college prospects. The recruiter offered infantry placement. Harlan requested ordnance, not from any desire for glory or heroism, but because ordnance meant mathematics, ballistics tables, trajectory calculations, the engineering of sustained firepower. Artillery was mechanics applied to destruction. He understood mechanics. Basic training at Fort Sill lasted 16 weeks. Harlan absorbed the manual doctrine without commentary. Loading procedures, firing sequences, maintenance protocols. Other recruits asked questions, sought clarification, debated methodology. Harlan processed information silently, converting tactical instruction into mechanical equations. His scores ranked adequate but unremarkable. Instructors noted competence without distinction. Transfer to the 23rd Ordnance Company placed him with supply route protection details in the China-Burma-India Theater. The assignment carried no prestige. Ordnance units operated behind frontline infantry, maintaining weapons systems and securing logistics corridors. Harlan treated artillery pieces the way he once maintained turbines. He checked barrel temperature with his palm after firing sequences, monitoring heat dissipation rates. He listened to recoil mechanisms for irregularities others missed, timing variations, hydraulic pressure inconsistencies, spring tension degradation. Cleaning followed the same methodical pattern his father used on turbine housings. Disassemble, inspect, clean, lubricate, reassemble. Find calm in repetition and exactitude. Other soldiers saw cannons as tools for destruction, instruments of violence requiring only basic function. Harlan saw precision equipment demanding respect and understanding. A howitzer poorly maintained would fail at the worst possible moment. Murphy's Law applied universally. What can fail will fail, and usually under maximum stress. During briefings, he rarely spoke. Officers outlined patrol routes, supply schedules, threat assessments. Harlan absorbed information without commentary, mapping variables in his head. Convoy timing, road conditions, weather patterns, enemy movement probabilities. His sergeant once remarked that Harlan had the personality of a dial indicator, accurate, unemotional, reliable. The comment wasn't meant as praise. On the Ledo Road, assigned to observation posts protecting supply routes through terrain where Japanese infiltration teams operated freely, Harlan requested solo guard duty. The request raised questions. Standard doctrine required crew coordination for exactly this reason. Distributed workload, mutual verification, backup capability if one man went down. But Harlan understood something his superiors didn't articulate in field manuals. Artillery placement was a problem of geometry and timing, and committees slow down decisions. He wasn't looking for medals or recognition. He was looking for variables he could control. The Army granted his request. Manpower shortages made solo posts inevitable anyway. They assigned him an M116 pack howitzer on a rocky outcrop 40 feet above the Ledo Road. Standard observation duty, 12-hour shifts, radio contact with headquarters every 4 hours. On February 14, 1945, His crew rotated out for medical clearance. Replacements never arrived. Harlan remained at his post, alone with the howitzer and the fog and 7 enemy trucks waiting in the valley below. The Ledo Road represented one of the war's most desperate logistical gambles. 478 miles of supply line carved through jungle and mountains to break the siege of China and sustain Allied advances into Burma. The route began in Assam, India, crossed the Patkai Range, threaded through the Hukaong Valley, and terminated at the Burma Road Junction near Mong Yu. Construction started in December 1942. 15,000 American engineers and 35,000 local laborers moved 2 million cubic yards of earth per month. Every 72 hours, massive convoys hauled ammunition, fuel, and medical supplies from India to forward positions. The trucks moved through terrain where landslides buried roadways, mechanical failure stranded vehicles in monsoon conditions, and enemy ambush could sever the entire supply chain. Engineers calculated that losing a single convoy would delay operations by 5 to 8 days. 5 to 8 days allowed Japanese forces to regroup, fortify defensive positions, and redistribute their own dwindling resources. The schedules were unforgiving. Convoys departed on exact timetables, regardless of weather, mechanical status, or intelligence reports. Trucks moved in darkness to avoid air reconnaissance, navigating switchbacks where visibility measured in feet, and a single stalled vehicle could block the entire route for hours. Drivers maintained 12-second intervals between vehicles. Too close meant chain collisions. Too far meant vulnerability to isolation and ambush. Each convoy carried enough ammunition to support 3 infantry battalions for a week of sustained combat. The mathematics were brutal and precise. 43 trucks, each loaded with 12 tons of critical supplies, moving through territory where Japanese special operations teams routinely destroyed bridges and mined roadways. The cargo manifests read like industrial inventories: 75mm shells, 50 caliber ammunition, diesel fuel in 50-gallon drums, morphine syrettes, penicillin vials, K rations, water purification tablets, replacement rifle barrels, radio batteries. Artillery emplacements were positioned at vulnerable points along the route. River crossings where bridges became choke points. Blind curves where forward visibility collapsed to nothing. Valley approaches where ambush was statistically most likely. These positions operated with minimal crews due to manpower shortages across the entire theater. Standard doctrine called for 6-man artillery teams. Reality delivered 2 or 3 soldiers per position, sometimes fewer, when illness or rotation schedules created gaps. The system relied on radio networks and predetermined fire zones. Observation posts reported movement. Command authorized engagement. Artillery crews executed fire missions. The chain functioned because it followed predictable patterns. Predictability created efficiency. Convoys knew when to move. Artillery knew when to watch. Supply depots knew when to expect deliveries. Predictability also created vulnerability. One section of the Ledo Road, a 3-mile stretch through fog-prone valleys near the Burma border, had become statistically anomalous. Intelligence officers tracked patterns the way actuaries tracked risk. 3 convoys had reported engine trouble in that sector over the previous 2 weeks. 2 had encountered unexplained delays, vehicles stopping without mechanical justification, drivers reporting unease, movement observed in tree lines that disappeared before confirmation. Intelligence suggested Japanese reconnaissance. Radio intercepts indicated increased enemy communications in the region. Local informants reported unfamiliar truck movement at night, vehicles without proper markings using secondary trails that paralleled the main road. But no confirmed sightings existed. No contact, no bodies, no physical evidence of enemy presence. The ambiguity created paralysis. Without confirmation, command couldn't justify rerouting convoys through longer, equally dangerous, alternate paths. Without contact, they couldn't justify committing infantry patrols to sweep terrain where soldiers would be more vulnerable than the convoys themselves. The supply line had to keep moving. Stopping meant losing the war in increments too small to photograph, but too large to ignore. On the night of February 13, 1945, convoy designation Baker 7 departed the staging area at Lado, carrying ammunition and medical supplies for the Mandalay offensive. 43 trucks. Standard route. Standard timing. Expected return at dawn on February 14th. The observation post overlooking the anomalous valley sector was manned by one soldier, Corporal James Harlan, 23 years old, alone with an M116 pack howitzer, and orders to maintain radio silence. Below, in the fog, 7 Japanese Type 97 trucks waited in positions that suggested coordination and patience. The system required the convoy to return. The system also required Harlan to follow orders. At 2:15 a.m., Harlan's radio crackled with routine check-in calls from convoy lead elements. Voices acknowledged passage through grid coordinates according to schedule. Baker 7 convoy, lead vehicle reporting position at checkpoint Delta 4. On time. No mechanical issues. Visibility poor, but manageable. The transmission quality held steady, no interference patterns, signal strength adequate. But beneath the expected transmissions, something felt misaligned. Harlan had listened to dozens of convoys over 3 months of observation duty. He knew the rhythm of routine, the way his father knew turbine harmonics, not through conscious analysis, but through accumulated pattern recognition. Drivers on long hauls developed a cadence. Steady voice, measured acknowledgments, professional but weary. This convoy driver's voice carried an edge. Sentences clipped shorter than previous nights. Acknowledgments arriving 3 seconds faster than normal. Not panic, not fear. Just tension bleeding through standard military protocol. The radio fell silent after the last checkpoint confirmation. Standard procedure. At 2:43 a.m., complete silence. The convoy had entered the most vulnerable section of road, the 3-mile stretch where communication discipline became absolute. No transmissions, no lights beyond convoy running lamps, no unnecessary engine noise. Move through fast and quiet. The protocol existed because this sector represented maximum exposure, narrow road, steep grades on one side, dense jungle on the other, fog accumulation that reduced visibility to nothing. But the silence felt different tonight, too complete. Harlan listened. No engine sounds echoing up from the valley, no distant grinding of gears on steep grades that carried through mountain air regardless of radio silence. Just fog and stillness. The wind had died an hour earlier, temperature holding steady at 48 degrees. Moisture condensed on the howitzer's barrel, forming small droplets that reflected starlight when the fog thinned momentarily. At 3:12 a.m., movement below. Not the convoy. That was still miles ahead. Maintaining schedule through the northern switchbacks. These were shapes appearing from the eastern tree line, emerging from terrain that had shown no activity for the previous 6 hours of observation. Vehicles moving without headlights, navigating by memory or previous reconnaissance. They positioned themselves across the road at staggered intervals. 7 vehicles. Harlan counted them through breaks in the fog, marking positions mentally against the road geography he'd memorized during daylight surveys. The placement suggested professional coordination, not random scavengers or opportunistic raiders. This was a prepared intercept element. The spacing created overlapping fields of fire. The positioning blocked both advance and retreat routes, standard ambush doctrine. At 3:31 a.m., figures disembarked. Movement spread across both sides of the road. The fog swallowed details, individual faces, weapon types, exact numbers, but the choreography was unmistakable. Soldiers moved to predetermined positions. Some knelt behind roadside boulders. Others disappeared into tree lines flanking the road. 2 remained with each vehicle, likely machine gun crews or reserve elements. This was a kill zone being prepared. Harlan's hand moved to the radio handset. Standard operating procedure dictated reporting suspicious activity through command channels. Observer identifies potential threat. Observer transmits to headquarters. Command evaluates intelligence. Command authorizes appropriate response. The chain existed for specific reasons. Verification prevented false alarms. Authorization prevented unauthorized escalation. Coordination ensured response matched threat level. He reached for the transmit button. His thumb rested on the metal surface. Cold, textured with cross-hatching for grip. He calculated response time. 15 minutes minimum for command evaluation. Duty officer would need to wake senior command, brief situation, receive guidance. Another 20 minutes for authorization to engage, confirming target identity, reviewing rules of engagement, coordinating with adjacent units. Additional time for a relief crew to arrive at his position, assuming one was available. Total time, 45 to 60 minutes. The convoy would return through this section at dawn, in 90 minutes. Harlan released the transmit button without pressing it. He reached for it again at 3:38 a.m. Same calculation, same arithmetic, same problem. The system required following protocol. The protocol required time the convoy didn't have. His hand returned to the howitzer's traverse wheel. Below, in the fog, the kill zone waited. Patient, professional. Ready. Would you have made the call? Standard operating procedure for solo artillery positions was absolute. Observe and report. Maintain defensive posture only. Engage exclusively under direct authorization from command. The logic was sound, built on decades of military doctrine and hard experience. A single operator could not sustain accurate fire. Risk of ammunition waste. Risk of position compromise. Risk of friendly fire incidents. Risk of tactical misidentification. Harlan understood the doctrine. He'd memorized the field manual during training, absorbed the reasoning during briefings, followed the protocols for 3 months without deviation. He also understood the mathematics of the situation developing below. 7 trucks positioned in a textbook, L-shaped ambush formation. Japanese infantry deployed in concealed positions along both flanks of the road. A convoy route with 0 alternative paths. The switchbacks behind prohibited rerouting. The terrain ahead funneled traffic through this exact valley floor. The ambush element had chosen the location with precision. Maximum exposure, minimum escape options. By the time authorization came through proper channels, the ambush would be triggered. The convoy, 43 trucks, roughly 430 men, would be fighting through a kill zone designed for maximum casualty infliction. First vehicles hit with concentrated fire to block forward movement. Last vehicles hit simultaneously to prevent retreat. Middle elements caught in sustained machine gun crossfire with no cover except their own vehicles, which were loaded with ammunition. Harlan ran the numbers. A 75mm howitzer required 4 men for sustained fire. Loader to handle shells from storage to breech. Gunner to aim and fire. Assistant gunner to set fuses and prepare ammunition. Ammunition handler to maintain supply flow and communicate with command. The division of labor wasn't arbitrary. It was engineering applied to human capability under stress. One man could physically perform all functions. Move from ammunition crate to breech. Load the 14-pound shell. Close the breech mechanism. Adjust elevation and traverse. Pull the firing lanyard. Reopen the breech. Extract the spent casing. Repeat. But the cycle time would be catastrophic. 15 seconds minimum between rounds if everything went perfectly. More likely 25 seconds accounting for physical movement between stations, fumbling under stress, the inevitable mistakes that happened when one person tried to do the work of 4. Against prepared infantry, with machine gun positions, that meant high probability of counter-battery fire. Japanese doctrine trained soldiers to identify artillery positions by muzzle flash and immediately suppress them. Harlan would get perhaps 3 rounds before concentrated fire forced him to abandon the position or die at his post. Position overrun within minutes. But 7 trucks weren't infantry. They were thin-skinned logistics vehicles, canvas covering wooden frames, no armor, probably carrying ammunition for the ambush itself, additional machine gun belts, grenades, perhaps mortars for sustained engagement, stationary targets in a confined space, bunched together because the road geometry forced tight grouping. Range 840 yards. Wind negligible. The valley's topography created dead air. Temperature 48 degrees, cold enough to slightly increase propellant efficiency. Trajectory calculations simplified by stationary targets. He had 6 high explosive rounds immediately accessible in wooden crates behind the gun position. More stored farther back, but 6 represented his practical ammunition supply for solo operation. The howitzer was already roughly oriented toward the road. Minor traverse adjustment required. Elevation set during previous calibration exercises. Firing alone violated every regulation in the artillery field manual. Every safety protocol developed through trial and catastrophic error. Every principle of coordinated artillery operations built on lessons written in blood across 2 world wars. Not firing meant watching men die because he followed procedures designed for different circumstances. Procedures that assumed crew availability, command communication, tactical support that didn't exist at 3:47 a.m. on a foggy outcrop in Burma. Harlan's hand moved to the traverse wheel, not from courage, not from heroism, or glory-seeking or dramatic sense of destiny, from the same instinct that once made him shut down a Goodyear turbine 3 minutes before catastrophic bearing failure, despite the production schedule demanding it stay online. The vibration pattern was wrong. The numbers didn't match expected performance. Shutting down cost the plant 6 hours of production. Not shutting down would have destroyed the turbine and possibly killed the crew working nearby. His supervisor had been furious until the teardown revealed the bearing race cracked through 80% of its circumference. Some equations didn't balance on paper. They balanced in the moment when you had to choose between the system as designed and the system as it actually existed. Harlan adjusted the traverse. 2 degrees east. The barrel shifted with hydraulic smoothness, metal moving against metal, with precision tolerance measured in thousandths of an inch. Below, the kill zone waited. Patient, professional, unaware. At 3:52 a.m., Harlan made his first correction to the howitzer's elevation. No fire direction calculations, no spotter assistance, no trigonometric tables or range cards. Visual estimation and mechanical intuition, the same process he'd used to diagnose turbine problems in darkness when instruments failed. The barrel shifted incrementally, small adjustments, precise movements. He moved to the ammunition crates stacked 6 feet behind the gun position. Wooden construction, rope handles, stenciled markings indicating shell type and lot number. High explosive. He lifted the first shell. 14 pounds of steel casing and explosive compound. Carried it to the breech. No wasted motion. Each action flowing into the next like steps in a machining sequence performed 1,000 times. The breech mechanism opened with hydraulic smoothness. He inserted the shell, feeling it seat against the rifling lands. Closed the breech. The mechanism locked with metallic finality that seemed impossibly loud in the fog-muffled silence. Steel against steel. Tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. Engineering precision applied to destruction. He checked alignment one final time. Hand on the firing lanyard. Cold metal wrapped around his palm. The lanyard extended 3 feet from the breech mechanism, standard safety distance to protect the gunner from recoil. He pulled. The concussion slapped through the valley, sound traveling at 1,100 feet per second through cold air. The howitzer recoiled backward 6 feet. Hydraulic pistons absorbing kinetic energy, carriage wheels rolling against the rocky outcrop. Flame erupted from the muzzle, a brief bloom of orange-white light that illuminated the fog for half a second before vanishing. 840 yards downrange, the first shell impacted. 15 feet from the lead truck. Close enough. The explosion threw dirt and fragments across the road surface. Not a direct hit, but sufficient to confirm range and trajectory. Harlan was already moving. Back to the ammunition crates. Second shell. 14 pounds lifted, carried, loaded. Breech closed. Minor elevation adjustment. 2 degrees down to compensate for the first round's impact point. Traverse unchanged. He pulled the lanyard. This one struck true. The truck erupted in orange flame that turned fog into glowing amber. Secondary explosions followed, ammunition cooking off, fuel tanks rupturing, metal fragments spinning outward through superheated air. Figures scattered from positions along the roadside. Dark shapes moving fast, abandoning cover, running for the tree line. Third round, fourth, fifth. Each shell required him to perform the work of 4 men. Loading 90-pound projectiles from crate to breech. Traversing the gun to track shifting targets. Checking alignment through the fog. Firing, extracting spent casings. Starting again. His hands moved with factory precision. No panic, no hesitation. No heroic narrative playing in his head. Just the rhythm of mechanical work executed under impossible conditions. Lift, carry, load, close, aim, fire, extract, repeat. The 4th round hit the second truck. Flame and smoke. The 5th round caught a cluster of infantry attempting to regroup near the 3rd vehicle. The 6th round impacted between 2 trucks, disabling both through fragmentation and overpressure. By the 6th round, 3 trucks were burning fully. 2 more showed visible damage, listing on destroyed axles. The remaining 2 sat abandoned. Drivers and crew fled. Japanese infantry retreated into the tree line, under fire they couldn't locate through the fog and darkness. Artillery from an elevated position. Single gun. Unknown crew size. Unknown ammunition supply. The tactical calculation favored withdrawal. Harlan loaded the 7th shell, his last immediately accessible round. More ammunition existed in secondary storage 30 feet behind the position, but retrieval would take minutes he might not have if the enemy attempted counter-battery fire or infantry assault. He held position for 30 seconds, watching for movement through the dissipating smoke and fog, listening for engine sounds, voices, weapon bolts cycling. Nothing. Just the crackle of burning trucks and the hiss of ruptured fuel lines. He secured the howitzer, traverse locked, elevation set to neutral. Breech mechanism closed. Standard post-fire procedures. The entire engagement lasted 4 minutes. Below, the road was clear. 7 trucks either destroyed or abandoned. Flames consuming canvas and wood. Metal chassis glowing red in places where fire concentrated. The ambush elements scattered into terrain, where pursuit was impossible and unnecessary. Harlan picked up the radio handset, the frequency still set to headquarters channel. He pressed the transmit button. Static hissed for half a second before his voice cut through. Position Sierra 9. Hostile vehicles neutralized. Convoy route secure. He released the button. The radio returned to silence. Above, the first gray light of dawn began filtering through the fog. The convoy would arrive in 40 minutes. Did the manual cover this? At 5:17 a.m., 43 trucks rounded the final curve approaching the valley section. Headlights cut through thinning fog, illuminating road surface and tree line in overlapping cones of yellow light. The convoy maintained formation, 12-second intervals, steady speed, drivers alert but not alarmed. Standard return route, standard timing. No intelligence reports indicated elevated threat. The convoy commander rode in the lead vehicle, scanning terrain through breaks in the fog. He noted smoke rising from the roadside, approximately 400 yards ahead. Dark columns drifting upward, dispersing into the pre-dawn gray. He attributed it to brush fires, common in dry season, when dead vegetation accumulated and spontaneous combustion occurred. The notation went into his mental log but triggered no alarm protocol. Drivers maintained speed, 35 miles per hour on straightaways, dropping to 20 on curves. The lead vehicle passed the first burned-out truck at 5:19 a.m. Canvas consumed, frame structure collapsed, metal chassis still radiating heat. The convoy commander registered it as battle damage from previous engagements, possibly weeks old. The area had seen sporadic contact for months. Abandoned equipment wasn't unusual. 43 trucks passed through without incident. No ambush, no gunfire, no casualties. The road remained clear, visibility improving as dawn light strengthened and fog dissipated. Drivers accelerated through the valley section, eager to clear terrain where mechanical failure meant blocking the entire route. The convoy reached forward supply depots at 6:43 a.m., slightly ahead of schedule. Unloading crews met them with standard procedure, manifest verification, cargo inventory, mechanical inspection. Nothing unusual noted. No damage, no injuries, no delays. Battalion logistics officers checked manifests against delivered cargo. Ammunition, all accounted for. Medical supplies complete. Rations matched shipping documentation. The operation was recorded as routine. One line in a daily logistics report. Green status. No exceptions noted. 6 miles behind the convoy, a Japanese radio operator sat in dense jungle, attempting to raise a platoon that had gone silent during their planned ambush. Repeated calls on primary frequency. No response. Switched to backup frequency. Static. Switched to emergency protocol. Nothing. At 8:30 a.m., an Allied patrol investigated reports of explosions in the valley. Local civilians had heard sustained artillery fire before dawn, approximately 7 rounds in rapid succession. The patrol approached cautiously, expecting possible minefield or unexploded ordnance. They found 7 burned-out trucks positioned across the road in staggered formation. Abandoned weapons scattered in roadside vegetation. Type 99 rifles, Type 92 machine guns, ammunition belts. Personal equipment dropped during hasty withdrawal. Canteens, entrenching tools, rice bags. No casualties, no wounded, no prisoners. The vehicles contained ammunition crates, demolition charges, and radio equipment consistent with Special Operations Interception teams. Japanese doctrine for ambush elements operating independently from main force units. The patrol's report noted apparent artillery strike from elevated position. Origin unknown, possibly from patrol elements operating off-book or unrecorded fire missions. At 11:15 a.m., command staff reviewing overnight activity reports connected the patrol findings to Harlan's transmission. Position Sierra 9. Hostile vehicles neutralized. The timing matched. The location matched. The engagement matched physical evidence. But the convoy had already passed through, safe, unaware. The 43 trucks never learned how close they'd come to driving into prepared crossfire. The drivers never knew someone had violated doctrine to clear the road ahead of them. The convoy commander never connected the smoke he observed to artillery fire that had occurred 30 minutes earlier. In after-action reviews, the convoy's safe passage was attributed to effective route security and Japanese interdiction operations by forward elements disrupting enemy planning. No official connection was made to a lone artilleryman who decided procedures mattered less than outcomes. The 43 trucks continued their schedule. Cargo distributed to forward positions. Ammunition resupplied infantry battalions preparing for the next advance. Medical supplies restocked field hospitals. Rations fed soldiers who would push Japanese defensive lines back another 12 miles over the following week. The supplies enabled operations that compressed enemy positions and accelerated the Burma campaign timeline. Territory gained, casualties avoided, strategic objectives achieved. The war moved forward, measuring success in miles gained and supply tonnage delivered. After-action reports documented outcomes in numerical terms: convoys completed, cargo delivered, enemy contact avoided. The system tracked what happened, rarely examining the invisible moments where individual decisions prevented disasters that never occurred. Success looked identical, whether achieved through perfect adherence to doctrine or through violations that happened to work. How do you measure victories that leave no trace? At 1:30 p.m., Harlan stood in his company commander's tent. Canvas walls, wooden folding table, maps pinned to a corkboard showing the Ledo Road network, cap removed, posture neutral, hands at his sides. The commander sat behind the table, reviewing paperwork, morning patrol reports, radio logs, after-action summaries from multiple units. He looked up when Harlan entered, gestured to the standing position across from the table. No chair offered. This wasn't a conversation. The briefing lasted 11 minutes. The commander's assessment was direct, delivered in the flat tone of administrative necessity. The engagement violated fire discipline protocols established for solo observation positions. Risked position compromise by revealing artillery placement to enemy forces. Expended ammunition without authorization from command. demonstrated flagrant disregard for established doctrine regarding engagement authority. It also prevented an ambush that would likely have resulted in significant American casualties and mission-critical supply loss. The mathematics created an impossible situation. The action was simultaneously insubordinate and necessary. Technically wrong, but functionally correct. The kind of problem that couldn't be solved through military regulations because regulations assumed clarity that combat rarely provided. No formal commendation could be issued for violating orders, even when the violation saved lives. Army doctrine didn't include medals for insubordination, regardless of outcome. Precedent mattered. Authorization chains existed for reasons that transcended individual incidents. No official reprimand could be filed for an action that demonstrably succeeded in protecting a critical convoy. 43 trucks delivered. 430 men arrived safely. Strategic timeline maintained. Punishing success created worse problems than rewarding disobedience. The solution was bureaucratic silence. The incident would be noted in unit logs as hostile contact, enemy vehicles destroyed, no friendly casualties, standard reporting format, no elaboration, no special designation. The report would be filed with hundreds of similar reports from across the theater, small engagements, local actions, routine security operations that kept supply lines functioning. It would not be elevated for review. No investigation, no formal inquiry, no command-level assessment. The paper trail would end at company level, buried in archives that no one would examine unless specifically searching for this exact incident on this exact date. Harlan would receive neither medal nor court-martial. He would continue solo guard duty on the Lado Road observation posts. Rotation schedule unchanged. Assignment parameters unchanged. The official record would show continuous service without disciplinary action or commendation. But there was an unofficial understanding. His judgment regarding threats was trusted, even if it couldn't be formally endorsed. The commander wouldn't explicitly authorize future violations of protocol, but he wouldn't assign another soldier to replace Harlan on positions where independent decision-making might prove necessary. The commander closed the briefing with a single statement. Next time, try to call it in first. Not an order, not a reprimand, just a suggestion that acknowledged the reality both men understood. There might not be a next time. And if there was, Harlan would do exactly what the situation required, regardless of what protocol dictated. Harlan returned to his position that evening. The howitzer sat where he'd left it, secured and waiting. He cleaned it with his usual methodical precision, disassembled the breech mechanism, inspected the barrel for stress fractures, cleaned carbon deposits from the chamber, lubricated moving parts, reassembled everything to specification. He prepared for another night of observation. Ammunition restocked, radio checked, field of fire confirmed. Temperature dropping toward another foggy dawn. He felt neither vindication nor guilt. The trucks had passed safely. The convoy delivered its cargo. The system continued functioning. That was the only measurement that mattered. In his jacket pocket, he carried a note delivered that afternoon through informal channels. No name, no return address. Just handwriting on torn paper. Don't know who you are, but 30 guys owe you a beer. Harlan never collected. He didn't drink, and he wasn't interested in explanations that required retelling decisions that seemed, to him, simply mechanical. You see a problem. You identify the solution. You execute the solution. You move on to the next problem. Recognition didn't improve the howitzer's accuracy. Gratitude didn't change ammunition supply. Words didn't affect convoy schedules or enemy movements or the fog that settled every night across the valley floor. The work continued. The observation post remained operational. The road stayed open. Above, stars appeared through breaks in the cloud cover. Below, the road stretched empty and dark. Somewhere in the distance, another convoy was forming up, preparing for another run, through territory where the difference between survival and catastrophe measured in seconds and yards and decisions made by people whose names would never appear in histories. The war moved through its machinery. Soldiers drove trucks. Artillery crews manned positions. Supply chains functioned. The system operated because individuals made it operate, moment by moment, decision by decision. Do systems reward the right choices, or just the documented ones? War remembers its charges and its last stands. Beach landings photographed from landing craft. Aerial duels captured in gun camera footage. Infantry assaults documented in after-action reports that become historical narrative. The dramatic moments that fit cleanly into chronologies and Medal of Honor citations. It rarely remembers the turbine mechanics who kept systems running when procedures stopped making sense. James Harlan returned to Akron in 1946. Discharged with standard separation papers, no fanfare, no parade. He resumed work in industrial maintenance at the same Goodyear plant, where his father still maintained turbines. Different shift, same machinery, same problems of vibration analysis and bearing tolerance and knowing when to shut down production, because continuing meant catastrophic failure. He never discussed Burma with anyone outside his immediate family. No war stories, no reunions, no Veterans Hall meetings where men compared campaigns and refought battles across beer-stained tables. When asked about his service, he said he maintained artillery in the China-Burma-India theater. Technically accurate. Conversation moved on. His military records contain a single notation about unauthorized weapons discharge on February 14, 1945, filed without elaboration. No recommendation for court-martial, no commendation. Just a line in a personnel file that eventually transferred to microfilm, then to digital archives, then to storage facilities where records wait for researchers who never come looking. The convoy he protected never knew his name. The drivers who passed through the valley at dawn saw burned-out trucks and kept moving. Standard procedure. The road was clear. That was sufficient information. The soldiers who reached forward positions supplied by those trucks never imagined a lone artilleryman violating doctrine to clear their path. They received ammunition and medical supplies and rations. They advanced another 12 miles. They engaged enemy positions. They sustained casualties and inflicted casualties and measured success in terrain captured and strategic objectives achieved. The system worked. The supplies arrived. The campaign progressed. But the Ledo Road kept flowing because somewhere in the margin between regulation and reality, individuals made calculations that systems cannot account for. Deciding that precision matters more than procedures, that outcomes justify improvisation, that sometimes the right action is the unauthorized one. Harlan understood something fundamental about complex operations. They function not because everyone follows rules perfectly, but because certain people know when rules stop serving their purpose. when doctrine becomes obstacle rather than guidance, when waiting for authorization means accepting disaster because the system requires permission to prevent catastrophe. He treated war like he treated turbines, as a system requiring constant attention, immediate response to emerging problems, willingness to shut things down when continuing meant catastrophic failure. The machinery didn't care about regulations. It cared about tolerances and timing, and whether the person responsible understood the difference between following procedures and achieving objectives. Wars are won by logistics, by supply chains maintained across impossible terrain, by convoys arriving on schedule, by ammunition reaching forward positions before soldiers run out, by medical supplies arriving before wounded die, by fuel deliveries sustaining advance tempo faster than enemy can regroup. The machinery of war requires thousands of decisions made by people whose names never appear in official histories. Truck drivers navigating mountain roads in darkness. Radio operators maintaining communication through atmospheric interference. Artillery crews protecting supply routes from observation posts, where doctrine assumed crew availability that reality never provided. The question isn't whether you would have pulled the trigger. The question is whether you would have trusted your own judgment when every regulation told you to wait, when every procedure demanded authorization, when following orders meant watching disaster unfold because you lacked permission to prevent it. Most people never face that choice. They operate within systems that function normally, where procedures align with circumstances, where regulations anticipate the situations they're designed to address. The ones who do face that choice rarely get medals. They get to watch trucks drive safely past smoking ruins. They get to see supplies reach soldiers who will never know someone broke the rules to keep them alive. They get to return to normal life, carrying the quiet knowledge that when it mattered, they calculated correctly. That's the legacy, not glory, not recognition, not official commendation or historical footnote. Just the turbine still running, because someone understood when to trust precision over protocol. Harlan died in 1987, heart failure, 65 years old. His obituary mentioned military service in World War II. 2 paragraphs, standard format. The convoy he saved never sent flowers. They didn't know. The system doesn't measure prevented disasters. It measures delivered cargo and casualties avoided and territory gained. Success looks identical whether achieved through perfect adherence to doctrine or through violations that saved lives. Would you have known the difference?